The sky was that soft Texas blue my husband used to call heaven's smile. I had counted every day in that rehab center 10 of them. My bones ached for my own bed, my porch, the smell of old cedar. The house had been mine for nearly 40 years. It was where my daughter took her first steps, where we buried the dog under the magnolia tree. I held the key like a sacred thing as I stepped onto the porch. The swing still creaked with the breeze. I smiled, home. But when I slid the key into the lock, it jammed. I pulled it out, checked again, tried twice more. Nothing. My fingers began to tremble, not from age, but something colder. I looked around. The welcome mat was gone. The curtains were different. Then I saw the mailbox, new name, new metal, and a new silence pressing against my ribs. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. Something about that lock not turning had already unsettled my heart in a way I hadn't felt since the day my husband didn't wake up, so I walked around the side path, careful not to twist my still healing hip. The garden beds I'd tended for decades were gone, replaced by stone mulch and 2 plastic flamingos I'd never seen before. My throat tightened. That's when I heard it. A voice. "Don't let Grandma know we sold her house." My daughter. I froze. She. "Find out soon anyway," she added. "There's no point upsetting her today." They were in the kitchen. Window open. I could hear dishes clinking, laughter. Her voice was light. Too light. I crouched low behind the fence gate, heart pounding so loud I feared it would give me away. Sold? My house. My house. No, this couldn't be right. Maybe I misheard. Maybe she meant someone else. But then another voice, her husband's, replied, "We already transferred the money. She's not on the paperwork anymore, right?" "Of course not," my daughter said. "She signed the papers before surgery." "Don't you remember? I hadn't signed anything. At least, I didn't think I had." The world around me blurred. My knees buckled, but I gripped the railing to steady myself. "She still thinks she owns it?" he asked, almost laughing. "She'll forget eventually," she said. "She's old. She won't even notice when the moving truck comes." My fingers clenched. The wood so tightly I felt splinters pierce my palm. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't age. This was betrayal, intentional, clean and rehearsed, and I was behind the door. I didn't go inside. I backed away, one step at a time, like someone leaving a crime scene only. I was the victim, and the weapon was their voices. I walked to the end of the driveway, the same one my husband repaved himself with his bare hands 20 years ago. I wanted to scream, to storm in and demand answers. But something in me, something older, stronger, whispered, "Don't react yet. Don't show your hand." They thought I didn't know, so I decided, in that exact moment, I wouldn't let them know I knew. Not yet, because if they had the audacity to steal my home, I'd steal something back they never saw coming. When my daughter finally opened the front door, her face was sunshine and syrup. "Mama, you're early," she said, arms outstretched like nothing was wrong. I didn't speak of the key, or the mailbox, or the voices through the window. I just let her hug me, breathing in a perfume. I didn't recognize something floral and far too sweet. "I was going to pick you up this afternoon," she chirped. "But this is even better." She helped me into the car. No mention of the house. No mention of home. 10 minutes later, we pulled into her driveway. Not mine. "The house is under renovation," she said casually, like she was telling me the weather. "New plumbing, new siding." "You know how bad it was getting?" "Just temporary, Mama. A few weeks tops." I nodded. What else could I do? Inside, everything was polished and new. Cold even. No photos of me. No traces of the past. She led me down the hallway to the guest room. It smelled faintly of lavender and bleach. The sheets were crisp and untouched. A suitcase min sat at the foot of the bed. I hadn't packed it. "I brought some of your things," she smiled. "Only the essentials." There was no Bible. No photo of my husband on the nightstand. No shawl I'd knit during chemo. "Where's Toby?" I asked. She blinked. The dog? Yes, the dog, I said quietly. Oh, I gave him to a neighbor. You can't handle a dog right now, Mama. Not with your hip. I looked out the window. A tree I didn't know stood in place of the old maple. This wasn't my house. It wasn't even my daughter's. House Dot, it was hers. Now, this version of her, I didn't recognize. Polished, pleased. Practice dinner was quiet. Her husband made small talk about stocks and lawn service. I nodded, smiled, chewed. I wanted to ask why she lied. I wanted to scream that I heard every word, but I didn't, because sometimes silence isn't. Surrender its strategy, and in that silence, I made a promise to myself. I would get to the truth. Piece by piece. Not for the house. Not even for Toby, but for the woman they thought they could erase without consequence. My daughter and her husband left for a weekend getaway 2 days after I arrived. She kissed my cheek and said, "Call if you need anything, but try to rest." Mama, I smiled and waved from the porch. Just like she wanted. The second their car turned the corner, I turned back inside with a different face. The calm one fell away. Beneath it was someone sharper, older, and tired of being underestimated. They thought I'd sit quietly and wait. But they'd forgotten I'd built a life from memory and instinct. I knew what was mine, and I knew where I kept the proof. I waited until dark. Then I began. The first place I checked was the closet in the hallway's second shelf behind the linen box. That's where the safe used to sit. Gray, heavy, reliable. It had held everything. Marriage license, deed to the house, my husband's will. Letters he'd written but never mailed. It was gone. I stood still for a moment, letting the absence settle into my bones. Then I checked the coat rack drawer, the old jewelry box, the underside of the sewing kit, places where I'd tucked papers I didn't want anyone else to see. Nothing. Even my recipe book. The one I used as a decoy hiding spot was gone. It wasn't just that the safe had vanished. It was that every trace of legal ownership had been scrubbed away, like I was never there. This wasn't panic. It was planning, and it didn't happen last week. This had taken months. My hands shook. Not with confusion, but with fury, so still and deep it felt like stone. When they returned the next day, sunburned and laughing, I asked gently, "Did you move the safe?" Her smile didn't even flinch. "What safe?" "The one I kept under the linens." "Oh, Mama," she said, her tone syrup thick. "You haven't had a safe in years. Remember?" "Yes, I have. I put the house deed in it right before my surgery." She exchanged a glance with her husband. "Maybe you've dreamed it," she said. "The anesthesia. It messes with memory, you know." She patted my hand like I was a child lost in fog. I looked her in the eye. "I may be old, but I'm not gone." She pulled away. "No one said you were, Mama, but everything about her said it." And in that moment, I understood they wanted me to doubt myself, to question memory, to erase myself. Before they had to do it for me, but I hadn't forgotten who I was, and I wasn't done. Remembering it was hers. Now this version of her I didn't recognize. Polished, pleased, practiced. Dinner was quiet. Her husband made small talk about stocks and lawn service. I nodded, smiled, chewed. I wanted to ask why she lied. I wanted to scream that I heard every word. But I didn't, because sometimes silence isn't. Surrender its strategy. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself I would get to the truth. Piece by piece, not for the house, not even for Toby, but for the woman they thought they could erase without consequence. That night, I barely slept. I lay still in the guest bed, eyes open in the dark, tracing the corners of the ceiling with every shallow breath. My mind wasn't on sleep. It was sifting carefully through decades of memory, and then it came to me. The shed. Back when my husband was still alive. He told me if anything ever goes wrong, there's one place no one will look. He meant the spot beneath the shed's floorboards. That rusted little patch behind the lawnmower where he'd buried the metal lockbox. At the time, I laughed, called him dramatic. He just smiled. Now I understood. The next morning over coffee, I told my son-in-law I'd like to visit the old place. Just once. Foreclosure. He hesitated, then nodded. Sure, I'll take you after lunch. We drove in silence. As we pulled into the driveway, I caught my breath. My porch furniture was gone. New shutters, new paint. But the shed, it was still there. I'll give you some space, he said. Staying in the car, perfect. I walked slowly, deliberately, as if weighed down by grief. Inside the shed, the scent of oil and dry wood greeted me like an old friend. I knelt beside the far wall and I began to dig. Not with a shovel, just my hands. The soil was loose, disturbed at some point, but not recently. My fingers brushed metal. I pulled. The box was still there. Cold, dusty, but whole. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside the original title deed, in my husband's careful handwriting, our marriage license, folded with ribbon A, notarized letter dated 7 years ago. My husband's clear instruction that the house must never be sold without my written consent and his will. Untouched by the lawyer my daughter used dye pressed the papers to my chest. It was all there. Every proof I needed. I stared at the words. My wife shall remain the sole resident and beneficiary of our home, regardless of future conditions, not just legal protection. Love. That was his voice again, reaching across time to remind me. I hadn't imagined my worth. I took photos of everything with the old phone I kept hidden in my purse. Folded the documents gently, placed the box back, and smoothed the soil as if tucking a child into bed. When I returned to the car, my son-in-law asked, "Feel better?" I smiled. "Much," I said. I stared out the window the whole ride back, holding silence in my mouth like a prayer, because now I had the truth. And soon they would. To Dot it was hers, now this version of her I didn't recognize. Polished, pleased, practiced. Dinner was quiet. Her husband made small talk about stocks and lawn service. I nodded, smiled, chewed. I wanted to ask why she lied. I wanted to scream that I heard every word, but I didn't, because sometimes silence isn't. Surrender its strategy, and in that silence, I made a promise to myself I would get to the truth. Piece by piece, not for the house, not even for Toby, but for the woman they thought they could erase without consequence. I waited until the following Tuesday, quiet, cloudless, ordinary. I told my daughter I was going for a walk around the block, needed fresh air. She offered to send the housekeeper with me. I declined instead. I called a taxi and had it drop me off 2 blocks away from the courthouse. No one saw me walk in. The county clerk's office smelled like dust and old air conditioning. The receptionist barely looked up, but when I asked for Susan Dillard, her head snapped up. "Susan? She'll know me. Tell her it's Evelyn from Pine Creek Church." Minutes later, I saw her round the corner, glasses pushed up in her silver curls, face breaking into a smile. "Lord, Evelyn, I thought you'd died." "Not yet," I smiled. "But someone's trying to bury me early." She leaned close. "What do you need?" I explained carefully that I was trying to verify a property transfer. She asked for the address, then disappeared into the back dot. 10 minutes passed. She returned holding a thin folder. "I shouldn't be showing you this, but I remember your husband. He built that house with his bare hands." She opened the folder and turned it toward me. There it was. My home sold, transferred into my daughter's name. No Conor. No joint signatory. Just her effective date. The week of my surgery, my hand began to tremble. But I pressed it flat on the counter. "Who signed the release?" I asked. Susan pointed. "Right there. My name. My shaky signature. But I hadn't signed it." "Not then." "That's not me," I whispered. Susan lowered her voice. "There's a power of attorney form on file. Medical POA, she filed it the day before your operation." I swallowed hard. "And that gave her permission to sell." "If it's not contested, yes." "But, Evelyn, did you sign a POA?" "No." She looked me dead in the eye. "Then you need a lawyer." Now I closed the folder and handed it back. "Can I take photos?" She nodded. I did. Before I left, Susan took my hand. You remember what your husband used to say? I nodded. You can lose your name, your house, and your money, but never your mind. I walked out into the sunlight, the warmth doing nothing to stop the chill in my chest. They didn't just steal my house. They'd forged my name, buried my voice, and counted on my silence. But they'd forgotten I built that home from the ground up, and I was coming back for every nail, every beam. Every truth.ev was hers. Now this version of her I didn't recognize. Polished, pleased, practiced. Dinner was quiet. Her husband made small talk about stocks and lawn service. I nodded, smiled, chewed. I wanted to ask why she lied. I wanted to scream that I heard every word, but I didn't. Because sometimes silence isn't. Surrender, it's strategy. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself I would get to the truth. Piece by piece, not for the house. Not even for Toby, but for the woman they thought they could erase without consequence. Dinner was pot roast. Her favorite, not mine. She served it with a glass of sweet tea, extra lemon, like I used to make for her when she scraped her knee in second grade. The table was perfectly set, napkins folded, candles lit, the whole performance. Her husband talked about lawn irrigation systems like I cared. I just nodded, let him talk. Let the silence swell like a tide beneath the surface. I waited until she raised her fork, mid-chew. Then I asked calmly, "Did you forge my name?" Her fork froze. Halfway up. Her eyes darted toward her husband. He stopped mid-sentence. "What?" she said, voice too high. "You heard me, Mama, what are you talking about?" Her hands trembled slightly as she set the fork down. I reached into my sweater pocket and pulled out the folded document, aged, creased, but undeniable. I laid it gently beside the mashed potatoes. "You forgot the copy under the shed." I said, silence. She didn't reach for it. Didn't blink. Her husband leaned forward, squinting. "What is that?" He asked. "The original title deed." I said, "With my name. And my husband's signature." "Not yours." Her lips parted. But no sound came out. "I also have a notarized letter," I continued, "from your father declaring the house was never to be sold without my consent. And the will, the real one." Her hands folded in her lap tightly. "I don't know what you're accusing us of." She whispered. "I'm not accusing," I said. "I'm remembering. And I remember everything now." He stood, pushing his chair back hard enough to shake the table. "This is ridiculous. We were trying to protect you by erasing me." She finally looked at me, tears in her eyes, but not sorrow. Fear. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," she murmured. I nodded. But I did. And just like that, the room shifted. The center of gravity moved. They weren't in control anymore. I was. "I've spoken to the courthouse," I said, "and to a lawyer. You'll be hearing from them soon. No screaming. No threats. Just quiet truth." She lowered her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something that looked like shame. But I didn't come for shame. I came for my name, and I'd just taken it back. It was hers, now this version of her I didn't recognize, polished, pleased, practiced. Dinner was quiet. Her husband made small talk about stocks and lawn service. I nodded, smiled, chewed. I wanted to ask why she lied. I wanted to scream that I heard every word, but I didn't. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself I would get to the truth. Piece by piece, not for the house, not even for Toby, but for the woman they thought they could erase without consequence. The courthouse smelled like old wood and justice stale, but solid. My lawyer, a woman half my daughter's age but twice her weight in steel, walked beside me with a folder under her arm and fire in her eyes. We filed everything in silence. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse. She didn't blink. I didn't tremble. Within a week, they were served. The knock came just before dinner, just when my daughter thought things had settled. I wasn't there to see it, but I imagined her face, confusion, then denial. Then that cold flush of being seen, the hearing came fast. My granddaughter, bless her, stood tall on the witness stand, voice shaking but firm. I heard my mom say not to tell Grandma, that she'd signed something while she was sleeping after surgery. Gasps. Pens scratching. My lawyer slid the original deed across the table like a sword. The judge took one long look at the forged documents, then back at my daughter. "This isn't just negligence," he said. "This is deception. Calculated and cruel." She didn't speak. She didn't cry. Her husband did. Quoi? He whispered something under his breath and dropped his head in his hands. The judge didn't sentence them to prison. But he did something better in my eyes. He ruled the house illegally, transferred, returned everything to me, froze their accounts, and placed a restraining order to keep them from contacting me without legal representation. But more than that, he said it in open court, in front of strangers. He said, "You tried to erase your mother for money. That's what I wanted the most. Not revenge, not even restoration. I wanted the truth to echo afterward." As I stepped out into the sunlight, reporters stood on the sidewalk with notebooks. I didn't speak to them. I didn't need to. The papers would tell the story. And for once, I was no longer a footnote in someone else's scheme. I was the headline. It was hers. Now, this version of her I didn't recognize. Polished, pleased, practiced. Dinner was quiet. Her husband made small talk about stocks and lawn service. I nodded, smiled, chewed. I wanted to ask why she lied. I wanted to scream that I heard every word, but I didn't, because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself. I would get to the truth, piece by piece. Not for the house, not even for Toby, but for the woman they thought they could erase without consequence. I didn't want the house back. It no longer felt like mine, not after the lies that soaked into its walls. Not after the locks were changed behind my back. Some homes are like old dresses. Once they've been worn by someone with bad intentions, they never fit the same again. So I took this settlement quiet, clean, and final. And I bought a cottage. Small, white bricked, with a red door and a wraparound porch just wide enough for a rocking chair and a pot of sweet tea. It sat only 3 miles from the house I once called home. But it felt like a world away. The first thing I did was plant roses. 4 bushes, 1 for each decade of marriage. My husband's photo sits on the windowsill. Watching the sun rise over our new start, every paper in that house deed electric bill carries my name. Only mine, no secrets, no silence. Just soil, sun, and the sound of peace returning. She took my house, yes, but not my mind, not my story, and certainly not my future. I've learned that. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with quiet smiles and soft lies. Sometimes it wears your last name. But blood is not loyalty. Loyalty is who shows up when no one's watching, who tells the truth even when it costs them comfort, who remembers you when there's nothing left to gain. And sometimes, the ones who betray you are not strangers. They're the hands you once held to cross the street. That's a grief I wouldn't wish on anyone, but here I sit. Older now and not bitter, just awake. I've written a new will, signed it in blue ink with steady hands, placed it in a fireproof box under my bed. The only key is around my neck, where no one can take it without looking me in the eyes. This time, my story is mine to end, on my terms, in my voice, and that I've come to learn is the best kind of justice.